The U.S. men's national team is back playing. I'm kind of excited, or I was until yesterday. U.S. lost to Colombia 5-1 in what was probably, what do you say nowadays, right? 2024, heading into Copa, World Cup in a couple years. It's kind of the same weekend that we've had for the last 5 years, but I do want to come on here and say that at this point, it's not Gregg Berhalter's fault. And I can't believe that I'm saying that. But when you look at it, it's actually, that's the case. It's not Berhalter's fault. And so whose fault is it? Whose fault is it? I think we're to the point now to where we keep referring to them, the U.S. men's national team, as this young team, young kids. And we're lucky to be in this, what so many people have labeled as like the golden generation for U.S. soccer. And absolutely, by looking at club level for a lot of these players, it's a great time to be following U.S. men's national soccer. But the problem seems to be when we come here for the national team for the last 5 years under Berhalter's watch, which you have to make an argument that Berhalter is probably the best U.S. coach we've ever had. As far as just statistically, if you're looking at certain things, you can make the argument, let's say. I don't want to get into that particular argument, but you can make the argument as far as getting out of group play at the World Cup, handling Mexico over the last few years, which of course it's the worst generation of players on the Mexican national team. That's what we're hanging our hats on here in the U.S., though. We refer to, we're dominating CONCACAF. And I guess maybe, depending on how you define dominating, we're somewhat successful, let's say. But we have been dominating Mexico, which that is always one of your top 3 things that you just have to do. You have to beat Mexico. But when Mexico is not very good, what's the next thing that we can point to and say we're on the right track? So here's where the fundamental problem is now. 2024, heading into Copa, coming off of this 5-1 loss to Colombia, which is actually a really, really good team. When you think about it, the U.S. team, if we played in South America, we're probably in the bottom half, as much as we don't want to admit that. And I think we individually look at some of the players on our team. I think we overvalue how good these players are. Case in point, Gio Reyna. Talk about a guy. I love Gio, but talk about a player that gets talked about so much for having done really nothing over the last few years. A lot of promise. Everybody's always talking about game changer, a lot of promise, bright future. What are we basing this off of? Because it's not on club level play, right? So I think part of our problem, if we were to kind of tier list this, Gregg Berhalter is down at the bottom of the list for where the problems lie. Number 1, it's going to be within the fans. I think we overrate most of our players, and even our top player. arguably right now, hard to say that's anybody other than Christian Pulisic, right? Fantastic year with Milan. So much fun watching him play in the Italian league, finally getting over the injury issues, playing consistently, getting away from Chelsea. He's a really good player. One of the top players in the Italian league this season. But is he what they would say, is he world class? I don't know. Is he world class? He's good. He's good. He is our leader on this team. One of the leaders, but he's probably at the top. Is he a good leader on this team? It's hard for me to make that argument that Pulisic is a good leader for this team, in a sense that when you watch him play, and I think this has followed him throughout his entire career, and I think a lot of people fault him for this, is that he's overly emotional and dramatic, where when you watch him play, and because of his talent in drawing a lot of fouls and a lot of attention from the other team, yes, he gets his fair share of pulling and tackles and all that at him at the club level, and especially when he plays for the U.S. men's national team. But he is always complaining when he's on the field. Always. That, for me, is the one drawback for Pulisic, is the fact that he constantly complains when he's on the field. So when we're looking at, okay, what are the issues, and how is Gregg Berhalter at the bottom of what the main issues are? Towards the top, I would say the fans, us U.S. fans, we overrate these players individually, because collectively they aren't very good. They've had some good moments, especially this past summer. And I mean, Berhalter wasn't there. And I think a lot of us are like, that's some of the best soccer we've seen from this collection, this group of players. But collectively together, I think we kind of rate them as pretty accurate. They're average. Okay. I mean, I think we can say we're lucky that we're playing in CONCACAF, and Mexico is on a huge downswing for the success of our players collectively within CONCACAF. But individually, I think we overrate the players across the board, top to bottom. We overrate these players. So part of the problem is us as fans. And another problem is the leadership on the team. And because Pulisic is the top dog here, I'm going to use him as the example of the leadership group, because it is the leadership group that has been talked about quite a bit since Berhalter has had his issues on the team. Reyna has had his issues on the team, and they talk about the leadership group. They overwhelmingly, most of the players, not only on the team, but especially in the leadership group, wanted Berhalter back. U.S. Soccer Federation wanted Berhalter back. They are the third problem in the hierarchy of what's going on with this team. The fans, the leadership group, U.S. Soccer Federation, so the level above Berhalter, bringing him back. It's not Gregg's fault. He wants his job. It's a great gig for him. I can't blame him anymore. I can blame him for being somewhat selfish in thinking that his needs and wants supersede that of the team, because we hear about this culture that he has built here. And I do think that is a benefit that we have to give him credit for, that the players recognize and like, is this positive culture within U.S. men's national team that the players, the coaches, the people around this team really do appreciate. Holding each other accountable. I get it. But the leadership group on the team, U.S. Soccer Federation, and the layer that's above Berhalter in the decision to have him back, those are the more critical issues with this team that need to be addressed if anything else is going to change. Nothing. It's funny because it's the same shows that are out there, the same pundits, the same soccer fans that get out there over the last 5 years, and it's anti-Berhalter this, and then on the other side, it's people defending and saying, look, you can't, you guys are never happy with Berhalter. He can't win with you. And fine, make your argument one way or the other, but here's where I think if we all transcend a little bit higher and look down on all this, if this is the consistent conversation, talking piece every week, every weekend when the team is together and playing, we're always coming here complaining about the exact same thing. Where's the identity of this team? Where's the grit, the fire? Why aren't the players performing like they do when they're individually overseas on their clubs? This is a bigger problem than just Gregg Berhalter and people hating Gregg Berhalter. I would give Gregg his credit. He's done very well for the U.S. team. And his biggest, the thing I hold him most accountable for is putting himself in the mix to come back and wanting to come back, thinking that he has something more to offer for these young players to take them to the next step through Copa, through World Cup 26. Gregg got a little selfish, and he needed to, if he's the mentor that we all hear about, and he does sound like a good guy to be that mentor, if he's really looking out for these individual players and this team, he would have, at the conclusion of the last World Cup, and with all the distractions that were going on with the Renas, he should have come to the conclusion that he's done all he can with this group. He's brought them to this point, instilled the culture that this group has, and he should have said, I've done all I can. Let the leadership group take it from here with a new coach. And then we could see where these guys could develop. That's my only thing right now with Berhalter that I'll say. He's a little too selfish to remove himself from it. But how can you blame him? Because if they're wanting to hand the keys to the U.S. men's national team to you, and you want the job and the paycheck and the office, can't blame him. He's here too long. But on the list of things that are critical and what weighs more, he's at the bottom of the list. The fans, we're part of the problem. If we continue to pay to watch and go to these games, that's reinforcement that to the people that are in charge, hey, everything's fine. Right? Everything's fine. The players are, I would say, the players and the layer above Berhalter with the U.S. Soccer Federation, 1A and 1B as the major problems. Because this is what the players wanted, most of them. Whatever it is that they were seeing and that they were buying into, they wanted more of it. And whatever that it is, if that was the case and they have bought into it, so they say, and they wanted more of whatever it is, where was it yesterday for the Colombia game? Yes, it was a friendly, a little tune-up. A lot of the clubs, or I'm sorry, a lot of the countries aren't going to be showcasing a lot of their strategy, especially so close to Copa kicking off. But even in that case, where you're like, it's a exhibition friendly, and the intensity level is a little bit scaled back. If that's the case, why didn't that affect Colombia also? And I think if you were watching the game, you could tell Colombia is a very good team. They weren't playing that hard either. And they definitely changed some things up, and their intensity was able to adjust after I think the U.S. scored the one goal, and I think it was like 2-1. And you're thinking, well, this might be a closer game when it was 2-1. And they were, from then on, the U.S. team was just outclassed. Strategy, effort, intensity, both playing the same exhibition game, both not showcasing everything that they had. And it was a 5-1 loss. People like to point at, well, you guys are making too big of a deal over a game that doesn't count. Well, which games can we point to that counted that we can say, hey, things are going great? Things are going really good. The Mexico games again? The draw with England? That's the high watermark for us that we're like, hey, things are going really well. He's not getting fired. Nothing is going to happen to Berhalter, I think, until the players start to revolt. The right players start to really think about, okay, this is our time. And how the stars have really lined up to where we have World Cup coming here to the United States in a couple years. This whole team is going to be in their prime. Until that leadership group on this team, and we're laying it down on Pulisic, until it gets to them like, hey, maybe we need to switch it up. Thank Berhalter for everything he has done to you, and I think a lot of us understand why Pulisic is a huge Berhalter fan. When you talk about all the coaching issues that Pulisic has had overseas, and Berhalter has been the one to really believe in him the most and played him at a you're the guy role. I understand. But at some point, Pulisic has to mature and grow up and say, look, I appreciate everything Berhalter has done, But for us to go to that next step, we have to make a change. And for that domino to start to fall, and you're going to need some help on the layer above, the ones that are making the decisions, you might need to enact change there somehow, or put enough pressure somehow to where when you get those two dominoes starting to fall, then you can make the change at coaching. And then we can get into a whole argument, well, who's going to coach? Because that would be a fun one, right? Who's going to coach? Or the bigger question, who would want to coach this team that is really good? That we all in our head were like, oh, we should be getting, insert the coach that comes with all the credentials and the swag, and not fully understanding when you take that thought out a little bit further, why would those coaches want to coach this team? That's another show. That's another show. So this isn't Berhalter's issue. It's not his fault. He's doing what he's there to do, that he has gotten reinforcement about. U.S. Soccer and the players want more of whatever this is, whatever it is, whatever he's brought, whatever culture he has. His feedback he's getting, the positive feedback from the players, this leadership group, Pulisic, from the people above, they're telling him, we want more of this. We liked what we saw the last 5 years. We want more of that. This isn't Gregg's fault. It's not Berhalter's fault. But for us to make any inroads into being competitive for World Cup 2026, because Copa, we'll see what happens in Copa. But everybody's saying, well, Copa is the measuring stick. If we falter in Copa, that high chance that they move Gregg. Based off of what? What have you seen? Because that's the same talking point that we heard every weekend for World Cup qualifying a few years ago. Bad weekend of games. Is this it for Gregg? Are we going to fire him, get another coach? All up through the World Cup and all the stuff out with Reina and the family. What are we basing this off of, that Copa is the measuring step? Copa is the measuring stick for keeping or firing Berhalter. There's nothing there to indicate that at all. It could happen. A disaster in Copa, it could happen. But rationally, if you point back to anything that's happened since, there's nothing to point to that'll say that. So we have to come to the conclusion that Berhalter is here for the second part of this phase, is taking us to the next World Cup. So we're going to see. But it's not his fault.